Freedom of the press. It's a term we often hear, and we probably think it just applies to newspapers, magazines, and news programs that are run by adults. But as Alexandra tells us, freedom of the press is a big concern for us students as well.
Thomas Jefferson, the man who gave us the Declaration of Independence, once wrote, "Our liberty depends on the freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost." As we've often reported here on Teen Kids News, a free press, whether newspapers, radio, TV, or online, is vital to democracy. It's one of our most basic First Amendment rights. Having a free press helps us to hold our leaders accountable for their actions. It also enables us to make decisions without undue influence by the government. And freedom of the press isn't just for adults who are journalists. More than 60 years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that students don't shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. It was a landmark ruling. Student journalists were being given the same freedom adults have to report on controversial issues. That ruling in 1969 prevented teachers and school administrators from imposing a form of censorship called prior restraint. That means they couldn't prevent students from speaking out on issues the administration wanted to keep hushed up. Everything was all good until the late 1980s. A new ruling by a much different Supreme Court took away that protection against prior restraint. The court ruled that a principal in Missouri had the right to prevent the student newspaper from publishing a story about teen pregnancy, as well as a story on divorce. That ruling has had a chilling effect on student journalism all across the country. But there's a movement working hard to restore our First Amendment rights. A key player in that movement is the Student Press Law Center, the SPLC. With us again is Pratika Katiyar from Boston's Northeastern University. She's a student board member at the SPLC. Joining her is Hannah Olson. She's from Mountain View High School in California. Pratika, why do school officials stop students from publishing certain stories?
There's a myriad of reasons why schools don't want certain stories out there. A big part of it is reputation. Certain stories that student journalists uncover, such as investigative stories, can delve into issues on campus such as sexual harassment or bullying, other important issues that make the school oftentimes look bad or look negligent. That's often the case where the school wants to protect the reputation.
Hannah, the last time we spoke, you talked about how your school paper was censored. How did that affect you as a journalist?
At the beginning of this process and when we were initially censored, it was very discouraging and very disheartening, I think, to myself and also to the entire class, to see our work and our publications' autonomy and ability to publish kind of be discredited and undermined. But I think in learning about my rights as a student journalist and getting the opportunity to speak with, members of the SPLC and, get into contact with other student journalists in the area. So it's been both discouraging at times and also empowering in the long run as a journalist.
What is New Voices?
So New Voices are a series of pieces of legislation introduced to states across the country to help restore First Amendment freedoms for student journalists. So in states that have New Voices laws, student journalists are protected from censorship, and oftentimes advisors are also included in these New Voices laws provisions. And the Student Press Law Center and student activists and journalists like myself and Hannah are working to get these laws passed across the country to help restore these First Amendment protections.
Ironically, California, the state where you live, Hannah, was the first to pass a New Voices bill. They actually did that before the Supreme Court took away student protection from prior restraint. Why didn't that protect you from censorship?
Initially, I don't think that my school newspaper recognized what was happening to us as censorship. I don't think we were initially as informed about what constituted censorship as we should have been, and therefore we were susceptible to kind of pressure to make changes to our article, and also, of course, the removal of our advisor and the removal of this introductory class. But that is really where the Student Press Law Center came in to help us regarding, what we could put in our article and whether it was libelous or slanderous or untrue, and none of the things that we were publishing fell into any of those categories. So yeah, I think that had we been more informed about what we could and could not publish according to our California Ed Code, I think that we would have kept certain parts of the article that we otherwise didn't just because we were scared.
But at least it does give you a strong case. So far, only 17 states have passed the New Voices legislation. Are more states considering it?
Yes, currently there are a couple states that are considering new voices legislation. It is a really long and slow fight in some states, but we're really hopeful that soon enough these states will recognize the power of student journalists and the need for these protections.
Just so everyone's clear on this issue, why is passing a New Voices bill in every state so important?
It's so important so that students can publish stories that matter within their communities and not be concerned about how it's going to make their school look. A lot of the stories that end up being censored are ones that reveal information about a school that is potentially hard to read and maybe hard to reckon with, but that's some of the most important information that needs to be out there.
Pratika, Hannah mentioned the assistance that her school got from the Student Press Law Center. What is the Law Center, and what are they doing to restore students' First Amendment rights to free speech?
The Student Press Law Center is a national organization that provides free legal services to students and their advisors. We also have the New Voices effort. We're the ones that are spearheading this movement. So currently, the Student Press Law Center helps assist things like lobby days or postcard writing events so that we can really mobilize students and get them out there to help advocate for New Voices legislation.
What can we students do to help?
I think stay informed, be aware of the student press freedom issues in your area, and also take a look at your schools and your state's education code laws.
Good advice. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
One of the most famous and most respected journalists ever, Walter Cronkite, put it this way: freedom of the press is not just important to democracy, it is democracy. Especially in this day of attacks on the media, we need to stand up for our First Amendment rights, including freedom of the press. For Teen Kids News, I'm Alexandra.